Everyone assumed the next major confrontation with Iran would look like what we've seen before. Airstrikes, proxy skirmishes, drone swarms intercepted over the desert. The familiar rhythm of escalation and de-escalation that the region has lived with for decades. But something happened recently that doesn't fit that pattern at all. And if the reports circulating in defense and intelligence circles are accurate, we may have just witnessed a fundamental shift in how the United States projects power not just in the Middle East but everywhere. The weapon used wasn't conventional. The strike wasn't announced, and the silence from Washington afterward was, in itself, a message. So the real question is, what exactly was deployed, why now, and what does it mean for every other country watching from a distance? This is independent geopolitical analysis and personal opinion only. All information is based on publicly available reports. I could be wrong. To understand why this moment matters, you need a little background. The tension between the United States and Iran didn't start last week. It has been building for decades, cycling through phases of direct confrontation, negotiated pauses, and proxy warfare fought across Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and Lebanon, according to publicly available reports from the Pentagon, U.S. Central Command, and international defense monitoring organizations. The Islamic Republic of Iran has invested heavily over the past 15 years in what strategists call an anti-access and area denial network. That means ballistic missiles, drone fleets, hardened underground facilities, and a web of allied militias spread across the region. The goal of that network is simple: make it so costly for the United States to operate in the Middle East that Washington thinks twice before acting. For a long time, that strategy created a genuine deterrence problem. Conventional air power could hit surface targets but deeply buried facilities, the kind Iran uses to protect its most sensitive nuclear and military infrastructure, required either a ground invasion or a weapon capable of penetrating far below the surface. Neither option was politically or militarily straightforward. That was the standoff. And then, according to reports emerging from multiple defense and open source intelligence communities, the United States deployed something that appears to have changed the equation. Here's what I think is really happening. The weapon referenced in the reports circulating right now is believed to be a next-generation penetrating munition, potentially a variant or successor to the Massive Ordnance Penetrator, which is the largest conventional bomb in the U.S. arsenal, designed specifically to destroy deeply buried and hardened targets. The original Massive Ordnance Penetrator, the GBU-57, weighs approximately 30,000 pounds and is carried exclusively by the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. It was developed precisely with Iran and North Korea in mind, according to publicly available reports from the U.S. Air Force and defense contractor Boeing. The weapon has been continuously upgraded since its initial development in the mid-2000s. But what is being discussed now goes beyond incremental upgrades. Analysts tracking U.S. defense procurement and Air Force testing programs have noted references to enhanced penetration capabilities, improved guidance systems, and what some describe as a new generation of Earth-penetrating technology. If the United States deployed this capability operationally and in a live strike context against Iranian facilities, that is not a routine escalation. That is a demonstration, a proof of concept conducted in the real world, with real consequences, in front of every adversary that has spent years building underground. Think about what that signals. Every nation that has responded to American air power by going deeper, by burying its most sensitive assets hundreds of meters below reinforced concrete, just received a message that going deeper may no longer be enough. That is not just a tactical development. It is a strategic communication delivered not through a press release or a diplomatic note, but through a crater. But here's where it gets interesting. The timing of this strike, if confirmed, is not random. It does not exist in a vacuum. To understand why this particular moment was chosen, you have to look at the broader geopolitical landscape that has been shifting over the past 18 months. Iran has been under significant internal and external pressure simultaneously. Internally, the regime has faced persistent popular discontent, economic strain driven by sanctions and currency collapse, and a succession of setbacks to its regional influence. Hezbollah, Iran's most powerful proxy, was severely degraded in the conflict in Lebanon. Hamas, another key partner in Tehran's axis of resistance, suffered devastating military losses in Gaza. The land corridor Iran had been cultivating through Syria and Iraq to supply its proxies was repeatedly interdicted. From Tehran's perspective, the strategic situation was already deteriorating, but Iran was also making moves to compensate, according to publicly available reports from the International Atomic Energy Agency and multiple Western intelligence assessments. Iran accelerated its nuclear enrichment activities significantly. Some estimates placed Iranian uranium enrichment at levels that put the country within a relatively short technical window of weapons-grade material. That acceleration was Read in Washington, Tel Aviv, and European capitals as Iran using its nuclear program as a pressure valve away to gain leverage in negotiations, deter military action, and signal that any attack would carry escalatory consequences. In that context, a strike using a weapon specifically designed to penetrate hardened nuclear facilities is not just a military action. It is a negotiating move. It is Washington saying, in the clearest possible terms, that the deterrent Iran believed it had constructed underground may not be as reliable as assumed. The strike, if it occurred as described, is designed to create uncertainty in Iranian strategic calculations and uncertainty. In deterrence theory, is itself a form of leverage. Most people are missing this, and it is the part of the story that will matter most in the weeks ahead. The global reaction to this reported strike has focused almost entirely on the bilateral US-Iran dimension. Will Iran retaliate? Will this trigger a wider regional war? Will oil prices spike? Those are legitimate questions, but there is a third dimension to this story that is receiving almost no attention, and it may ultimately be more consequential than anything happening between Washington and Tehran directly. The countries watching this most carefully are not in the Middle East. They are in East Asia and Eastern Europe. Specifically, they are in Pyongyang, Beijing, and Moscow. North Korea has spent decades and an extraordinary share of its national resources building underground, its missile programs, its nuclear facilities, its command and control infrastructure. Almost all of it is hardened and buried. Kim Jong-un's entire deterrence strategy rests on the assumption that his most critical assets can survive a first strike. According to publicly available reports from the RAND Corporation, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and various congressional testimony, the depth and hardening of North Korean underground facilities has long been considered one of the most serious challenges facing U.S. military planners. If the weapon used against Iran can credibly threaten those facilities, Pyongyang's calculus changes overnight. The same logic applies to certain facilities in China and to hardened Russian assets. Every country that has built its strategic depth downward rather than outward just received new and unwelcome data. And that means this is not just a Middle East story. It is a global deterrence story, a demonstration conducted in one theater that sends a message to every other theater simultaneously. That is precisely why the silence from Washington is so deliberate. You do not need to hold a press conference when the rubble makes the argument for you. If this analysis is correct, here are three things to watch closely in the next 30 to 60 days. The first signal to monitor is Iranian diplomatic activity. Tehran's response to this strike will tell you a great deal about how seriously it has recalibrated. If Iran moves quickly toward back-channel negotiations or signals a willingness to discuss its nuclear program through intermediaries Qatar, Oman, or the European Troika, that suggests the strike achieved its psychological and strategic objective. It suggests Iran concluded that continued escalation carries risks it is not prepared to absorb right now, particularly given the weakened state of its proxy network. Conversely, if Iran responds with a kinetic retaliation against U.S. assets, Israeli targets, or Gulf state infrastructure, that signals the regime prioritized domestic political signaling over strategic rationality, a decision driven by the need to demonstrate to its own population and military that it was not humiliated without response. Watch the language coming out of Tehran's Supreme National Security Council. Watch whether Ayatollah Khamenei addresses the strike publicly or remains silent. Silence from the supreme leader would be an extraordinary and telling signal. The second indicator to track is movement within the U.S. nuclear and strategic posture debate. Pay attention to statements from U.S. Strategic Command, from senior Air Force officials, and from the Armed Services Committees in Congress. If there are references to updated targeting doctrine, to accelerated procurement of penetrating munitions, or to revised assessments of adversary underground infrastructure vulnerability, those references, even in heavily technical language, will confirm that this strike was not a one-off event but the opening move in a revised strategic posture. The third signal is the reaction from Beijing and Moscow. Neither will comment directly, but watch for changes in Chinese military communication regarding its own underground facility programs. Watch for any acceleration of Russian investment in hardened infrastructure. And watch, perhaps most importantly, for any shift in how North Korea discusses its nuclear deterrent publicly. If Pyongyang suddenly becomes more aggressive in its rhetoric about its underground capabilities, that is a sign of anxiety, not confidence. Countries that are genuinely confident in their deterrence do not feel the need to reassure themselves out loud. This is independent analysis only, not news. I could be wrong, and I genuinely encourage you to read multiple sources, consult different perspectives, and stress test everything I have said here against your own knowledge and judgment. Geopolitics is not a field where certainty is possible or even desirable. what I am offering is a framework, a way of reading what happened, why the timing matters, and what to look for next. If that kind of structured, calm analysis beyond the headlines is useful to you, subscribe. And more importantly, tell me what you think. Do you believe this strike represents a genuine strategic shift, or is it being overstated? Do you think Iran retaliates or absorbs the blow and recalculates? Drop your analysis in the comments. The most interesting conversations in geopolitics don't happen on television. They happen in places like this. All information in this video is based on publicly available reports and represents personal opinion and analysis only.